So let's just talk for a second then. It kind of leads to this question. Are these permanent? If somebody is, let's say, diagnosed with a mental disorder, do we think of that as a permanent diagnosis?
Right. Again, I'm going to say it depends. To some degree, it depends on the person. It also depends on the illness that they have. And some things are one-time events. You have a particular crisis in life, and your response to that is some kind of mental health crisis. And you get through that, and after that, you never struggle again. Other things set us up for patterns of responding, right? For example, in depression, there's probably about half of the people who have a major depressive episode will never have another one, right? But if they have a second one, then there's almost a 75% chance that they'll have a third one. And if they have a third one, then there's a 90% chance that they'll have another one after that. And so for some people, it's one and done. And for some people, they will struggle for the rest of their life with depression, particularly during those difficult seasons of life. Other things like schizophrenia, which is a more severe disorder, we would say it follows the rule of quarters. And so about 25% of people recover, they never struggle again. Another 25% of people will continue to have the illness, but they will be able to function in daily life with medication and care. Another 25% will struggle quite a bit more, and they'll be in and out of the hospital. And then the last 25% will probably be hospitalized for the rest of their life.
Well, then let's just talk about maybe an elephant in the room, if you will. Okay. There's a lot of things that we might see maybe in the media, whether all forms of media, maybe it's news, maybe it's in shows that we watch, whatever the case may be. And there can be a tendency to think that we need to fear people who have mental disorders. Is that something that we need to consider? Do we need to be afraid of people that have mental disorders?
My general response to that is no. And if we look across the disorders, generally, people with a mental illness are less likely to be violent than the general population. And we can talk about lots of different reasons why that is. If I'm specific, in depression, the person lacks the energy to be aggressive, right?
Sure.
In some of the psychotic disorders, the person lacks the ability to think in a rational, organized way. So they can't plan and carry out that kind of behavior. However, right, and so this is where we need the nuance in this discussion. We do know that in people who have chronic, severe mental illness, that there is a slightly elevated risk for dangerous behavior, for aggressive behavior. And so if I look at people with severe mental illness, I'm looking at it just under 3% would act aggressively at some point. That changes with other risk factors. So if we add alcohol use, for example, then all of a sudden that risk shoots up to 1 out of 10. The difficulty in understanding that is it the mental disorder that's causing the violence, or is it something else? And what we tend to see in those folks are other factors. We see, backgrounds where there's a lot of abuse, or there's poverty, or they live in a really rough neighborhood. All these other factors that tend to lead to violence in everyone tend to be the same factors in these folks. And so maybe it's those factors and not the mental illness that actually lead to the violence.
Yeah. And discernment and wisdom is really important.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think it's important to say God asks us to ask for wisdom. So seeking God as we think about that, as well as professionals, and what professionals are saying can be really insightful and helpful to us as well. So Janet, then let's just talk a little bit about what does happen in those cases where someone becomes aggressive. Share with us a little bit of insight and wisdom from your perspective. What should we do?
Well, I've worked in a lot of different settings, and from community mental health, private practice, to being in a psychiatric hospital and in a maximum security forensic unit, so prison, essentially. And I have been there when people become pretty aggressive. And so what I want to do in those moments is I really want to be aware of my own behavior. And so I would say some rules of thumb, right? If somebody is delusional or paranoid and they have thoughts that really aren't matching reality, but they feel threatened, they feel like people are watching them or coming after them, I do not want to directly challenge those thoughts, right? People will, even when they have a disorder, they will act in a way to protect themselves if they feel threatened. And my challenging those thoughts will cause them to feel threatened. Sometimes when people have that very severe mental health disorder, like a psychosis, you will see them do something that we call posturing, where it's almost like they freeze in place and they're ready for whatever is going to come to attack them. Think of a cat about ready to pounce, right?
Yeah.
When I see that in someone, then what I want to do is stay out of their personal space. Like the worst thing that I could do in that moment is to enter into their personal space and touch them. They will react. The other issue is somebody is becoming verbally aggressive or, maybe throwing things or that sort of thing. How do we engage with them in that moment? First, absolutely stay calm. You may have everything in you screaming, but you have to stay calm. And that means calming down your body, moving slowly, speaking slowly, maybe lowering the volume of your voice. You want to be firm, but not aggressive. I want to maintain eye contact with a person, but not in a way that's threatening. And so I don't want to have a, stare down contest with them. That's not going to go well. Absolutely do not touch the person. And if you have to touch the person to remove them from that area, say so before you do it.
And when you say so, do you mean ask?
Ask.
Okay.
So I want to show respect for that person. Now, what we know is if I can engage them in a conversation and if I can hear what's going on, what their concern is, and I can allow them to tell me, then they will de-escalate during that part of the conversation. Knowing that you're being heard matters in the way that you're processing things. And so I want to be very respectful. I need to depersonalize. So the harsh things that they're saying are not about me. And it's important for me to remember that because that keeps me from getting defensive. And I just want to hear their concerns. And then if possible, we'll work out a solution. Is there some way that we can manage this right now? If not, then I want to see if after they begin to calm down a little bit, if they would be willing to go somewhere else with me to continue the conversation. And so that's how I would move them down from that really heightened place where they could very easily become aggressive and violent.
Well, you've given a lot there. And there's a couple things that come to mind. In the beginning there, you kind of mentioned pay attention to your own reality inside of yourself, and everything inside of you may want to be aggressive back. And that's kind of a natural tendency for us when we feel threatened, where we could have that fight, flight, or freeze response, certainly. But just to clarify, if you feel that, or if we feel that, or if anyone is engaged in that and they feel that coming on, is there something we can do to kind of help ourselves calm down in that space? Is it important to pay attention to breathing? Those kinds of things help in the moment?
I think they do. It's skills that I would use to kind of ground myself, right? And if I notice that I'm starting to get really anxious, can I slow down my breathing? Can I think about things that I see in the room or things that I'm touching? Focusing on those sensations will help me calm down a little bit. Now, I would say, however, that if you are feeling that way because you really are in the place of being attacked, or there's this risk that you could be harmed, then you do need to remove yourself from that situation. We don't want to stay in a situation where we might experience harm.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think about being on a plane, and they always say, hey, when the oxygen mask drops, put it on yourself first so that you can help others.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what we're getting at when we're saying pay attention to that and your breathing to help yourself. But if necessary, certainly remove yourself from the situation. And is there ever a time where it's appropriate to call maybe the authorities, police or someone to come? Is that something that we need to consider as well?
I think, unfortunately, it is sometimes something that we need to do. If we try to engage the person, using the skills that we know to de-escalate them, and that's not working, and we feel like either they're in danger or the people around them are in danger, we may need to get authorities involved. I think we have to do that cautiously, particularly in a church setting, because there are long-term consequences of doing that. It really does break down trust that people have in church with fellow church members, but also, I think, with pastors and perhaps even with God himself.
Sure.